Shut up and sit down.
This is Off the Walk.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of Off the Walk. It is Pride Month is coming up, and we are proud supporters of the LGBTQ+ community. And tonight we have a special guest with us to talk about his experience and, of course, his podcast, Gay Narratives. Thank you, Ricky, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm very impressed that you got the letters correct of all the, even the plus. So very, very nice.
Awesome. So Ricky, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your podcast and why you started it.
Sure. So I'm Ricky. Great to meet everyone. I started Gay Narratives. That's the name of the podcast, really because I think similar to why a lot of people start podcasts and communities is thinking back on my own experience growing up and even, as an adult in the LGBTQ plus community, there wasn't really a place where I felt like I belonged. And so I just wanted to create something like that for not only myself, but for other people also in the community. And also the main focus of Gay Narratives is to focus on sharing stories and the moments that really shape our lives. So it's not meant to be, anything groundbreaking. It's really meant to just be to share our day-to-day, moments that happen in our lives. And hopefully that will allow other people to hear it and to relate to it and also just reflect on their own lives also. So it's really meant to be a space for us to share with each other and to get a little deep, but also have a little fun.
That's awesome. Was it something that you had thought about doing for a long, long time, and then you finally were you nervous to start something like this?
So yes and no. It was something that I've always thought about, but I never knew what form it would be, if that makes sense. So I always knew there was something missing that I wanted to do, and I wanted to give back to the world. And I didn't really know what I was looking for or what that looked like. I didn't know it was going to be a podcast, right? I'm a writer at heart, so I always just enjoyed writing, journaling and sharing my, stories and things with very, very close friends and family. And so it wasn't until recently, I think during the pandemic when everyone was just stuck at home doing podcasts, that it struck me where it was also a challenge for myself because you'll hear, in one of my earlier episodes where I share, I hate talking about myself. I'm one of those people where, you go around the room, during school or at work when it's just like a quick, simple intro. And I get so anxious and I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to say? And so it was partly a challenge for myself also to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to record myself talking to myself. And I record in my closet too. And it's just my own space. And so it was something that I always knew I wanted to do, but I didn't know that it would be in the form of a podcast, which is kind of evolving on its own right now, to be honest. I started not too long ago and it's already kind of changing and I'm just kind of going with whatever direction it takes me day after day.
Right on. I could totally relate with you, Ricky, because I'm kind of a quiet guy too. And I hate, I'm the same kind of guy, like someone asks me a question and I'll get, sweaty palms and and so often people often say, well, you're doing a podcast? It just doesn't seem fitting for me. But at the same time, there's stories out there that I would like to share with the world too. And, even for me, having small children, it's kind of like, I just want to maybe leave them with something that, if they can come back to it and, oh, that's, how dad was, or, this is what he thought about. So I can definitely relate about the nervousness of doing your own thing. And it's funny because oftentimes when I hear my own voice back on these podcasts, I'm just kind of like, oh man, it sounds so bad, right? You're just like, oh no.
You're cringing when you hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, did I say that? Or, oh, it just sounds weird. But yeah, I can totally relate with you.
Yeah, I think that's so cool that you're also thinking about it as a thing for you to leave to your children. I don't have children myself, but I think of, my young niece and nephews who someday, when they're older, maybe and more mature, they can listen to my episodes and really experience a part of me that they probably have never heard about,
Yes.
being their uncle. So that's really cool that you mentioned that. I never really thought of it that way.
What's another thing that's funny? I was actually just listening to one of your earlier episodes today, and how you were talking about recording in the closet, which is ironic. I laughed out loud when you said that. It didn't even occur to me too. You're doing it.
Yeah, you should see it. It's not a big closet. So right now I'm not in my closet, but when I normally record all my episodes, I'm just cramped inside and surrounded by clothes because apparently it's supposed to help, I don't know, make it sound nicer, but also because that's the quietest place in my house.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I heard about, yeah, because you're supposed to have like sound deadening, right? So you don't get that sound
mhm.
coming into your mic and whatnot. But that is funny. So you're going in the closet, but no, you're actually out of the closet, obviously. And so what? How's that story? Tell us about the story of how you came out.
So, oh, I can talk for, days about this because part
That's
of
what we're
part of
here
coming
for.
out part of coming out is it's not, at least to me, it's not really a one-time thing, right? There are big moments of, coming out where you think of coming out to your parents or to your best friend or to your siblings if you have siblings. But it's really an ongoing thing, right? Like I come out almost every day to strangers, to coworkers, to just people, you encounter in your life. And you always have to make that split second decision of, do I come out today to this person or not? So for me, it's just an ongoing thing. But I would say the one most important one to me, when I think of coming out, is when I came out to my mom, and that was like the biggest thing because I'm a mama's boy. I'm super proud of it. And I'm the baby of the family, youngest of three, and it was just all these years, and I didn't come out till I was 21, so I was pretty much
Ooh.
an adult already. And so
Mhm.
all these years um were building up, and finally I got to a point where I had to make a decision and basically be like, I haven't even felt like I was living a real life, my
Mhm.
life, up until 21 years. And I look at all my family members and my friends, and, it just made me wonder, like, do they even know who I am? Because I've been keeping this such an important part of myself away from them for so long. And so it was all building up. And I remember it was Christmas Eve, and it was just me and my mom at home, and we had dinner together. It was like baked salmon or something with broccoli, something
Wow,
healthy.
you remember the meal
I
too.
remember all the details because building up to it, it took me days, and I was like, I'm gonna do it today, and then that day passed, and then the next day I was like, I'm gonna do it today, and it didn't. Finally, it was Christmas Eve, and we had finished dinner, and she was washing dishes, and I remember sitting at the dining table, and we were just chatting and stuff, and then the conversation ended, and I was like, oh shit, this is the moment. Like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it right now. And my heart was just pounding. Like, I was so nervous. My palms were sweating, and I
My
was
heart's
like,
pounding right now.
No,
and I was like, hey mom, in Chinese, but I was like, hey mom, and she's like, yeah. And I was like, you know how you always ask me, why I don't have a girlfriend or when I'm gonna have a girlfriend? And she was like smiling. And she was like, yeah. I think because she thought I was gonna tell her that I finally have a girlfriend. And she was like happy and eager to hear the news.
Mhm.
And then I paused and I told her, well, that's because I'm gay. And that was the first time I'd ever said that to her out loud. And it was even one of the first times I said it to myself out loud too. I hear myself saying that, and immediately, she put the dishes down, turned the water off, and she just looked like, she heard the most terrible news ever. And of course, that made me just completely feel gutted because I had all these scenarios in my mind of how this would go, and I was like, am I gonna have to pack my stuff and, maybe leave that night or whatever, or am I getting kicked out? Is she gonna be completely happy and, give me a hug? And her reaction wasn't the ideal reaction of what I wanted. And her first thing was very Asian mom, typical Asian mom, and it was like, what did I do? Or, how did this happen? And it was like right to safety, because afterwards, she explained to me at that moment, her thought was the safety of my son and what this means being gay. And in her mind, as crazy as this sounds now, she thought that gay people meant AIDS, right? So it's like, oh, what's wrong? Like, are you okay health wise, and all those things. And then, at work, are you going to be discriminated against? And all these things kind of ran through her head. So after that, it took a few months of just kind of working through conversations, and it was very awkward. And I felt like our relationship kind of took a pause at that point, because we had been super close and we still are now. But during those few months, it definitely took a pause. And there were moments where I was like, are we ever going to get back to where we were before? Which was so painful, because I was the same person, right? It was just those 3 words, I am gay. Like, that didn't change me as a person, but somehow it shifted our relationship at that point to go a different direction. And I didn't know which direction it was going to go. Of course, now looking back, it was in the brighter, much better direction, where I can openly, share with her who I am 100%. She knows my husband now because she has a new son-in-law. And so it's just all these things back then that I didn't know when I was 21. So when I think about coming out and I focus on one story, that would be the one that just completely changed my life. Everything else, has had a significant impact also, but that one in particular was kind of a make it or break it thing, because my mom is, one of the most important people in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that it hits me the heart on this one. And I don't know, do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have an older brother and older sister.
And how did they, like, what was their reaction when you first told them?
My brother's the middle, and we're all 3 of us are super close. I told my brother actually one night when he was, this was before I told my mom. He was the first family member that I told, and he was getting ready to go out, so he was putting gel in his hair in our bathroom, and it was the similar thing. I was in my room, and my heart was pounding. I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like, this is the night, and I think I purposely caught him right before he was kind of going out, because I wanted it to just be a quick conversation and to get it over with. And so he was doing his hair, and I walked in, and it was a big mirror. We had 2 sinks, and I was standing on one sink. He was on the other side, fixing his hair. And I was like, hey, I wanna tell you something. He's like, oh, okay, what's up? And he's like doing his hair. And I'm like, I'm gay. And he was like, oh. And he stopped doing his hair, and he looked at me. And he was like, okay, thanks for telling me. Like, that doesn't change anything, You're still my brother. I still love you. And then he continued fixing his hair, and that was the conversation. It was not a big deal. It wasn't dramatic or anything like that. There were no tears, and I kind of liked that about it, because it made me feel so comfortable. Like, oh, it's a normal thing. It doesn't have to be this big buildup of, they say the more you do something, the more you practice at something, the easier it gets. It's kind of like that coming out to me. It's like the more you say it, the more you feel comfortable with it.
Right.
And I think all these years of doing that has made me feel a little bit more comfortable. I wouldn't say I'm fully comfortable where I'm just like, hey, everyone, I'm super gay, like from the moment I meet you. But it definitely, it's those normal moments where it's like the response is, oh, okay, not a big deal, let's move on, let's talk about the weather or whatever. That's what makes it easier.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is because my brother came out, and it's probably been 10 years now. But
Oh, wow.
to me, it's kind of the same, right? I was like, okay, I'm like, it's all good. Did you tell mom? Did you tell dad? And how did they react? Because I was worried about our mom and dad, how they would react. Said no, they're cool with it. And but I guess the thoughts came into my mind was, I was like, oh man, I'm like, we have this relationship, and it took so long for him to tell me, and I felt like I wish you would have came to me earlier, because I'm sure there was just so many things that I could have helped out or supported him, or given him whatever types of advice that I could give him. And I felt somewhat sad in a sense that I was like, oh, I really wish that I was there with you through it all. But obviously I'm still here in any way that I can support him, right? So yeah, just that's the way that I felt when he came out. But I think it's great, and like you say, it wasn't until his adult years until he came out, and that's why throughout his life, just thinking about the confusion and all of those things that was going through his mind, and having to deal with it on his own, really hit me, that I was like, there's three of us, right? So there's three brothers all together, but just thinking in my mind, I'm like, really, I guess I don't know what else I could have done. But I guess this is just something that, you kind of had to go through on your own to figure it all out. Right. So totally.
I wonder if you, like, for example, Ricky, like, did your brother, do you suspect that he kind of already knew? Or Lance, did you already as well know? I guess we'll start with you, Ricky, or yeah. Do you think?
We actually talked about it after the fact, and he didn't. He had no idea, and I think that's the typical response that I get from my friends that I went to high school, middle school with. They had no idea, and that's why it was such a big deal. It was such a big shock, and what you just said, Lance, is so typical. I think, especially when I talk about it with my friends and family now, it always goes back to, how the hell did you keep this to yourself like 21 years of your life? And I would have wanted to be there for you in those moments, and I think that's what goes through everyone's head, because the automatic thing is, oh man, like, I care about you so much, and I only wish that I could have been there for you. But I think it's important to remember that there's a reason why I didn't come out till I was 21, because I wasn't even ready for it myself. So, I always get the question of, do you wish you would have come out sooner, maybe in high school, and had a more free and open life? And I don't know if I would, because I didn't even have the acceptance myself that I was gay. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I needed to figure that out on my own for myself, to fully know this is me and this is who I am, before I was even ready to tell myself that, and then to also share it with people that I care the most about. So I think that's a very common thing.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, how did you know? When did you know that you were ready to come out and tell everyone?
So, when you first asked, when did I know? I actually knew I was gay when I was in second grade. I just didn't have the terminology or, the understanding of what being gay was. I didn't even know it was a thing. So I knew very, very, very early on. And when I tell people that, they're like, what? Like, how do you live a life, knowing that you're gay, and not coming out till so much later in life? But I didn't know that I was ready to come out yet until, I would say, I saw a friend come out in college. And at that point, I was still so naive, where I knew there were gay people out there, but I didn't know anyone personally in my life that was gay or that knew gay people. And it wasn't until I actually went to my first gay bar, which, this friend of mine, he came out in college to our group of friends and took us out to a gay bar. And I remember stepping foot in there. This was in West Hollywood. And I was so naive back then. And it was packed. The music was blaring. And I looked around and there were so many people. And I was just shocked. And I was like, is everyone here gay? And I had never even imagined that such a place existed. And I think, not that it sounds so cliche. It's like, oh, I knew when I stepped foot in a gay bar for the first time. But I think it's just the visibility part where I looked around and I saw people that didn't physically look like me, but just people that saw me and that I saw them. And it was like, oh, we're part of the same community. Like you get me and I get you too. And it was, I think, that moment that I realized there's more to my life than just trying to, become someone else or trying to live a life that really didn't feel like my own. And that's when I started feeling more comfortable with even thinking about my own future of, can I be an out gay man and still be able to keep all the friends and family that I have? And that's what slowly allowed me to accept myself, to get me closer to being comfortable with coming out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you look at it now, I think, if you're talking about like 10, 15 years ago, coming out was definitely something harder, right? It was, a lot of stigma, a lot of things around that. And now it's kind of everywhere, right? It's very, very widely accepted. And so, I mean, in comparison, do you think it's easier, like, obviously to come out today versus back in the day? Because I think back in the day, I think there might have been a little bit, more hesitance to come out than it would be today.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely play the old guy card and say back in the day it was harder for sure in my experience, because even when you think of, and this might be a little too raunchy, but I'm still gonna share this. But as teenagers and as young adults, right, you start exploring sexually and you start just exploring what it's like to date people and stuff. If you imagine today, there's apps, there's dating apps. It's just a normal thing, right? Back in the day, when I wasn't out yet, that didn't exist. We didn't have swipe left, swipe right on our phones. The only thing we had, was things like Craigslist and shit like that. So
Yeah.
it was not as easy to explore those things, especially if you're kind of in the shadows and not out. And so one, it was dangerous, right? Because you don't know who you're meeting. You don't have a dating profile like you do today, and it just wasn't as accessible. So I think it was harder back then for sure. But I'm very happy and hopeful to see nowadays that kids, my niece who's in 6th grade, she shows me her chats with their friends, and they openly talk about, hey, are you pro LGBTQ or are you not? And this is just a normal thing to them. And it's so amazing to me, where I didn't even realize there could be such a thing as a gay bar or people, a community, until I was 21. So times have for sure changed, and I feel like it's definitely easier now. But I'm very grateful for that. And I'm happy for the younger generations that they don't have to feel like they need to, be behind the scenes and be in the shadows and doing all these dangerous things just to try to get a taste of what, their sexuality is and what dating feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great, right? I think that it's great that we have so many communities out there, much more media coverage, and we're seeing it more and more. Even I have my kids talking about it, and as parents, we come out there, we can educate our children about all of this. I think it's a very nice to have these kind of open conversations, whereas like you say, like, and I'm an old fart too, right? So where we talk about 10, 20 years ago, that is massive. It wasn't talked about enough. And I think a lot of people, hid their sexuality for a long, long time. And there
Yeah.
are some that probably, maybe even till this day have not come out,
Mm-hmm.
just hiding themselves, right? Just behind a facade, right? And so I'm glad that, again, there's so much more coverage on this now, and people can feel safe, like you say,
Yeah.
to come out and really truly express themselves, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. And I like the fact that when you did go into that gay bar and you actually found that sense of community there to give you kind of like, it's not just there's a whole community out there, whereas before that you probably just felt alone, right? There was no one else. And I guess another something I'd like to ask is too, like, were you also growing up, were you also scared too? Because I'm not sure, maybe 10, 20 years ago, there was definitely a lot of negativity associated with that. And maybe you had also maybe friends and stuff that would make jokes or any of that type of stuff growing up. And so because of that, you probably were scared as well too. And you didn't want to do that. I don't know. Did you notice that maybe is their attitudes changed or something after you did tell them, or are you now no longer friends with them?
I now I just surround myself with people who support me and love me for who I am. So I don't have people in my life anymore who may not agree. I'm putting air quotes, agree with me being a gay person, because I just don't have that kind of patience or time, really. Life is short. I don't have time to be letting people dictate my own value and having their opinions tarnish my own view of who I am, just as a person. And so but growing up, I did for sure have that feeling of fear that you talk about, because a part of it is just being alone and not knowing what this feeling is. That I always knew, I said, since I was in second grade, I was different, but I didn't really know what that was. I just knew I was drawn to boys and more attracted to boys, and I preferred being friends with girls and playing with girls. And I think as I went through middle school and high school, I slowly started being so good at covering that up and being more, I would say, boyish, right? And I think that's why people were so shocked. People who have known me all my life were like, how did I miss this? How did I not see this? It was because the fear pushed me and shoved me into the closet so deep that became my life of who I am. And people just thought that was me. And so it's definitely that feeling of being afraid and not knowing. And I remember also there was a lot of negative stigma around gay people. And even though I didn't have a lot of exposure to gay people, we didn't talk about gay people at all in my family. I grew up in a Asian household. We were immigrants, and it just wasn't a thing. My parents didn't know any gay people personally. My siblings probably did in school, but maybe they weren't out, so they didn't know. But I remember hearing this, I don't know if it was a story or a news story or something, but it was something about how gay people who had AIDS were trying to spread it, and people would go into movie theaters and sit down and feel like a pinch on their leg when they sit down, and they would find a needle, and at the end of the needle would be a piece of paper that said, "Welcome to the world of AIDS." And I don't know where that came from, but to this day I still remember that story. And I think that's part of the negative stigma that was being pushed on the LGBTQ community back then, to say these people are going to hell, these people are terrible. And I think that those are the things that scare children and even adults, to be like, what you don't know, you don't want to know, because that world is so dark. And so I just thought of that when you said fear.
You know what? My parents, they're also immigrants too. That's literally when you said when you came out to your mom and she thought about AIDS, my dad, same thing. Like he's probably roughly the same age, I'm assuming, as your mom. Like it's that same type of, even like now he's starting to like, but it takes a long time. It's just it's a, and I don't know how it all exactly in my end, how he came about to come to that conclusion as well too, where you just associate that with this. But it's at least now it's, because now it's being talked about more. It's more, it's not as stigmatized as before. It's starting to change people's minds about this now. But yeah, it's tough. Like and I'm assuming in your household, it was, I guess, more conservative, where you have predefined roles for men and women, and okay, in the household, men like women, women like men. That's how it is. And so you probably were like, well, that's not. You probably were like, when growing up, you're like, this is not it. This is not it for me. Like I like guys. So like you're probably like, that's probably another reason why you're probably confused too, because you're like, this is, society is telling me this thing, but I'm going this other way. So it's kind of weird, but luckily, the gay bar.
The gay bar changed everything.
That enlightened moment, that one night.
No, that's right. I mean, I guess, like, for people now, what type of advice do you have for them, if they haven't come out yet? What would you say to them from all of your experience now, if you were to say that through obviously through this podcast now, but to anyone that's listening, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say just be true to yourself. And if it feels right, go with that and lead with your heart, because everyone has their own time. And you can't say that, just because I came out at 21, someone else should come out earlier now. Everyone has their own path, and some people may never come out, and that might be okay for them, because maybe they never get to that place where they feel comfortable even being as a gay person. And so I would say just lead with your heart, be true to yourself. And I think at the core of it, what matters the most and what will naturally lead you to your own coming out, if that ever happens, is just to remember your own worth and your own value. Because what happens a lot of times for people in the LGBTQ community is that all of this fear and confusion and guilt and shame that is stigmatized to our community, it all gets internalized, and then it becomes a me thing. And people grow up thinking that it's something about them, as opposed to it's something about society that's trying to put you in a box and trying to create these gender stereotypes or roles or assumptions about you, when in fact you're the person that knows yourself the most. So I think the ultimate thing is that everyone goes their own path, and as long as you remember to love yourself first and to lead with your heart, it will naturally guide you to where you need to be.
Nicely. Well said. Well said. I guess that brings me to, I get a question about, like, what are your thoughts about, I guess, gay stereotypes? Is there, there's a lot of different stereotypes out there, and oftentimes, like, even people say to me, right? Because my brother is gay, but he's oftentimes my friends are like, no, your brother's not gay. Like, he doesn't look gay. I'm like, well, what does gay look like, right? And I think there's a lot of different stereotypes about what gay people look like. So, what are some of those stereotypes?
There are a lot of stereotypes, and to be honest, some of them are true. Just to name a few, let's have a little fun here. Well, one stereotype of gay men, especially, is gay men are super horny and they go and just have sex with a bunch of people and they hook up. They're not monogamous, and that is a stereotype that's both, you know, from the straight community looking at us and also within the gay community. I'm not gonna say that's true or not true because everyone has
straight
their own...
people do that too.
That's true. That's true.
You know?
For sure.
I mean, another easy stereotype is that gay people are more feminine, right? More girly. They like to, I don't know, they're light on their feet. Just the, what was it, last year even, all these stereotypes are, I mean, I'm laughing because some of them are just ridiculous, but some of them are true. They come from patterns of behavior within groups of people. I mean, that's how stereotypes come about. There's like Asian stereotypes, and some of those are true too. I remember even just a couple of years ago, we were having like Father's Day brunch with me and my husband and his family, and we were ordering drinks, and we happened to order like margaritas. It was at a Mexican restaurant, and it was kind of more of a girly drink. I'm putting air quotes again, girly drink, where, you know, there's like salt on the rim and it's like sweet and stuff like that. And we got, you know, that across the whole table. And my father-in-law's very butch and very, you know, just imagine the typical, he's a construction worker. And so he was drinking it too. And he made a joke and a comment about, oh, you know, I got a Nancy drink or something. And he kind of did the hand gesture of the hand,
like,
you know, yeah, like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, half of me was like, good for you. You can joke about it now, because he's, you know, he had to come a long way to, I think, accept the fact that his son was gay. But part of me was also like, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's stereotypes are everywhere. I think some are true. I definitely embody some of the stereotypes myself. And I think that's fine.
Right on. What's it like? You're obviously, you know, married now, but what was the dating scene like in the gay community? Was it hard? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Was it just like, you know, anything, everybody else?
Mm-hmm. Dating is just hard in general. I hated dating. But especially as a gay man, I was kind of a unicorn, because talking about stereotypes also, right? Gay men hook up a lot, and, you know, they have one night stands, and they're okay with having multiple partners, and go around dating different people. I was always the type, I'm a complete prude. And so even amongst my gay group of friends that I kind of got to know after I came out, I stuck out because I didn't hook up. I didn't have one night stands and all those things. So it was hard for me to really find other people, even within the gay community, like me. And it was hard for me to date because there was such a sense of urgency towards sex and towards hooking up that I wasn't here for. And so, yeah, even within my own community, I found myself also, again, feeling a little bit alone because I was not part of the, you know, hookup culture.
Yeah.
I think you gotta. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, you end here, but you gotta tell us the story of how you met your partner, of course. You gotta give us that story.
So it's a really boring story, but we met on OkCupid. So I used, you know, modern day technology. The big joke amongst me and my friends is that even though I'm not into hookups and all those things, I've probably gone on more dates than anyone I know, more first dates than anyone I know, because to me it was kind of like, okay, I meet someone, and whether it's for a relationship or a friendship or anything, I kind of know off the bat if I like you or if I don't, or if there's a connection. And the older I got, the more I was like, I don't have time to be wasting, to go on a second date if there's no connection. And so I would go on so many dates, and eventually, this was when I still lived in San Francisco. And you know how on the dating apps, you choose your vicinity, like your miles out?
Right.
I had to expand my radius on my app on OkCupid because I had run out of people to basically date. And so I expanded my radius. At the time, my now husband was living outside of the city in the East Bay. And we happened to connect because I increased my mileage on my dating app. And then we went on a first date. And he was very much like no bullshit also. He was very interested in me, and he wasn't interested in playing the games of, oh, I'm going to wait, a day or two to text.
Yeah.
He literally texted me after we had dinner, we left, parted ways, and I was walking down to the train to catch my train back to the city. And he texted me already and said, hey, I had a great time. Like, let's go out again. And I think that's when I knew, like, okay, this could go somewhere, because I also was to the point where I was like, I don't want to play this dating game anymore. It's tiring.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, I'm speaking on behalf of my brother, but I mean, he's also complained about, the gay community and how it's just a hookup game, and it's just hard to find a good, kind of good, reliable relationship, and to find someone like that. But I guess another question is do you think it's harder being an Asian, a male Asian in the dating scene? Is it harder or is it easier in that sense?
It depends on what you're looking for. I would say it's harder because of the fact that Asian men get fetishized a lot in the gay community, meaning a lot of older white men like and seek out Asian guys, because Asian guys typically look younger than they really are, and they just have that kind of, the stereotype for gay Asian guys is they're feminine, they're soft-spoken, they're physically smaller typically also. And so all these things, I think allows, again, people even within the gay community to put us in a box, to say, oh, you're a gay Asian man, that must mean you're submissive, you're this, you're that. So I felt like it was harder because that made it harder for you to really know what the other person's intention was. I found myself going on dates with people and thinking, are they just going on dates with me because they think I'm that submissive, that, soft-spoken gay Asian guy, or do they really like me for me? And are they really interested in getting to know me? And it creates this kind of conversation in your head and constant kind of just questioning and doubting yourself, of whether you're acting in a certain way that's allowing people to think that way about you or not. So I think it's more difficult for being Asian and gay, specifically in the community.
Cool. I guess, in your perspective, do you think there's any differences in a gay relationship in comparison to a straight relationship?
No, I don't think there's any difference. We have the exact same arguments about who's not taking out the trash enough, who's not doing the dishes, letting the dishes pile up in the sink. We have the same arguments about who's leaving the toilet seat up or down, like all all these things. It's the same. The only difference is, you may have two guys and you may have two girls or whatever, but everything else is the same to me.
The same. So I guess what are still some of the challenges in today's world within the gay community?
That's a good question.
Or maybe
Do you
is there still any challenges, or maybe there isn't any.
Well, there's definitely challenges still. Do you mean within the community, or just
I guess you could focus within the community, and then maybe even if you think there's challenges outside of the community.
so starting with within? I think we list out all those letters, and I was joking a little bit in the beginning about LGBTQ plus. Um, I think within the community, there's a lot of self hate amongst the different groups, and also just um, one stereotype is that lesbians don't like gays because lesbians are super no bullshit. They don't like the gay culture where it's super dramatic and things. Like, lesbians are stereotypically not into that. And I don't want listeners to think that I'm totally, just pushing these stereotypes. I'm just stating them because
Right.
they exist.
Yeah.
But I think within our community, that causes a lot of walls being built up, even between us. And I think that's the biggest shame. Even naming my podcast Gay Narratives, I had to think about whether I was being inclusive enough, because naming it gay as opposed to leaving out all the other letters in our community was a choice that I had to make. But at the end, I still did it because that's the only story and narrative that I could speak to. And I can't speak on behalf of anyone else, that are lesbian or transgender. I just don't have that personal experience. And so I think within our own community, there's still a lot of, not meeting each other in the middle. And, even speaking of transgender, there's a lot of people within the community that are feeling like they're at the bottom of the hierarchy, right? When you think of a system or a community, there's naturally a hierarchy, whether we like it or not, just as a society. And I think a lot of the people who are not as openly represented in the world, we say right nowadays, the LGBTQ community is more represented, but it's a lot of white gay men and maybe lesbians. We don't see as much of a light being, shined on transgender people, bisexual people who are also part of a community. So I think within there's a lot of work to be done for us to really start bridging that gap ourselves, instead of just scrambling and trying to highlight our own letter. Externally, there's there's so much, so many challenges still, I think, to this day. A simple one is, it's very simple. And recently I actually brought this up at work, where, we say, hey guys, a lot, just as a normal term to refer to, hey you all, or hey everybody. And I don't think the intention behind it is a gender thing at all. It's just part of our English language, where, hey guys, thanks guys, how are you guys doing, right? That in and of itself can put someone, in a box and make someone feel very uncomfortable if they do not identify as guys, or if they don't want to be called a guy. And so something as simple as that, just it's the education that still needs to happen outside of the community, that we have a long way to go. But I will say we have definitely come a long way, where, again, I look at kids like my niece and nephews, and they're talking to their friends about LGBTQ inclusivity and all these things, where it just never existed before. And I think it's great. So there's a lot of work to be done still, but times are changing, and changing, I think, at a faster pace than it was in the past. So I'm very hopeful about that.
Right on. I am guilty of what you just said, because I do hey guys a lot, and it could be a room full of guys and girls, and I'll still say kind of like hey guys. I'm not just referring to the guys. It's just, I guess it's just that terminology that that we're just so used to saying. So I'm gonna have to, maybe look out for that tendency and just rethink about what I'm saying, because you're right. I mean, it could potentially affect someone in a negative way, and I wouldn't want that either. So, but realize if I do say that, I'm not trying to peg anybody out or anything like that. So,
I use the word so I nowadays in my emails and stuff I use hey peeps. I don't even know if that's supposed to be the right one, but I just go hey peeps. So I actually use
well,
that.
let me ask you this: what would be the right term that if we were to say something, what would be a proper way that maybe no one would get offended?
So I personally, it's been hard for me to also have to shift because I definitely used hey guys just as a normal thing before. I started using hey everybody or hey you all.
Y'all.
Hey you all sounds a little, sometimes I use y'all, but I'm not from Texas, so it feels a little bit inauthentic.
It's too
So
American, and this is a Canadian podcast. We don't use you all here. No,
Yes.
no.
So I just say hey everybody, hi everybody. Hey peeps,
I like that.
I like that.
Hey peeps. Hey peeps. I like that one too. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question too, because it's related to this. Because as I'm talking about this hey guys thing, right? It seems like such a small thing. And even I feel like nowadays it's easy for us to not know what to say or how to address something. And it can very much feel like we can't say anything. Otherwise, someone will say we're, shunning them or something like that. As straight guys, to both of you, do you ever feel that way? And does it make you feel uncomfortable not knowing, like, I don't want to say the wrong thing or offend anyone? How do you deal with that?
Yes.
I just don't say anything. Honestly, it was even, I'm not even gonna lie, like even for this episode that we're doing now, I'm in my mind, even before, I'm like, I need to I need to like, I don't know what, I hope I don't say anything wrong.
Yeah. You feel like you're on eggshells, like,
Right,
constantly kind of like, okay, did I just offend somebody? Uh-oh.
Oh.
But I will bring up a story about like my brother, in the sense that when he did first come out, I was like, uh-oh, like, no gay jokes, no, like, and especially as a guy, there'd be a lot of those kind of, especially we're talking about back in the day, there was a lot of this kind of joking around. So I definitely was more heightened to, making sure that I don't say these kind of offensive things, right? Knowingly it's just a joke, but still knowing that this could potentially, kind of, put, make someone feel uncomfortable, right? And so oftentimes, and, obviously through the years now, I know my brother, I know what I can say, and I talk to him about it. Do you find this offensive when I say this? And we're open to that dialogue. And I think that for sure has helped me. But in terms of like in a workplace, yes, I think we all are very conscious now about what we're saying. We have a lot of groups, like especially at work, there's a lot of talk about diversity and inclusivity. So, you're constantly just like, what can you and what can you not say? I don't think there's a whole lot of, courses or knowledge or anybody that's talking about, okay, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, those kind of things. Because I like I was saying, you guys, and I'm so just accustomed to saying that I don't even realize that I'm maybe being offensive to someone, right? Until someone says, hey, listen, I don't really like it when you say that, and then it will kind of kick into your head and go, oh, okay, I didn't even realize that. I'm so sorry, right? So yes, for sure.
Yeah. Same with me. I'm not gonna lie, like when I was younger, I've said some things, like, I didn't have any gay friends growing up either. Even to this day, myself, I don't know anybody, really anybody that, and I've been guilty in my younger years of making jokes using certain words and stuff like that, of which, now I've kind of, I'm more conscious now. You could say that I was, I guess, more like ignorant back then in some of the jokes that I've said in my past, that now, I stopped saying these things and stuff like that. So like I've grown myself over all these years. There were words back then that were used much more, I guess you could say, liberally, and you could even even when you watch movies from back then, like, or like how their usage of words, of how they describe it was all like almost like part of the natural vocabulary, which now when you watch movies, that's not happening anymore. Like they're changing their vocabulary. So that's one thing. But yes, I'm not gonna lie, it's eggshells, man. It's so.
I have a story. Like, I remember back in the day, there used to be a phrase where we'd always be like, "Oh, that's gay," and it would be nothing, to be, saying anything bad about the gay community or anything like that. But it was just this thing to say that it was, I don't know, it was just something that wasn't good or something like that, right? But then, obviously after my brother had came out, and you start to rethink those things real quickly, and you go, whoa, like, no, don't say that. But and I think that's where we have to kind of still, it's about education, right? As long as we educate ourselves, and like we have these kind of podcasts and these kind of medias to cover this, and people are listening, then we can continue to collectively become better and better, right? And like you say, today we're suggesting ideas like hello peeps or hello everyone, and maybe this is the beginning of that change, right, that we need. So I'm definitely glad we are having this conversation right now.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, you mentioned education, which is so important. I also think it's the intent behind everything that really drives this, because it's okay not to know what to say or what not to say. And sometimes I just honestly ask. If I meet someone who looks like they may, be a certain way or something, and I feel like, oh, I don't want to make any assumptions, I often just ask, what pronoun do you prefer to use? And I think that the intent of me genuinely just wanting to get it right and to not say anything wrong goes a long way. And I don't think people would shame you for that. Whereas on the other hand, there are people who intentionally go out and try to purposely say things and to harm people. That's a very different way. And you can pick up on that real quick, right? When people intentionally do things like that. But if people make honest mistakes, in if someone calls me she or her, and I'm like, oh, actually I go by he, him, it's okay, because if the intent was not to harm and to belittle, then to me that's fair game. It's fine to educate each other and to grow together.
Yeah. I remember one of the biggest, like, kind of like when I was growing up, the biggest stereotype for me for someone who was gay was the flamboyancy. To me was always like, oh, this person's really flamboyant. And I was like, maybe he's gay. When I was growing up, and then I watched, the Birdcage, and that kind of helped solidify a bit more. But then I remember when I was in university, I had worked with this guy on some projects and stuff like that, and later I had found out that he was gay, and I was like, oh wow. But he wasn't like flamboyant or anything, and he looked like he was just none of that, and kind of like destroyed that stereotype for me. And from there I was like, okay, it's I'm thinking differently now. This is just because you're flamboyant doesn't, or like because if I'm looking at a person, they're flamboyant, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're automatically gay or something like that. They might just be flamboyant or something like that. And when I'm looking at another person who's not like that, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're always straight every time. So
Yeah.
that as you live, you grow, and you with the changing times and stuff like that, your mind changes, and you learn, and you pick up, and you certain things, preconceived notions that you thought in your head are now being broken down and stuff, and you're looking at things in a new light. So that was my story on
Nice.
on that. Yeah.
I have one more question. So, are there any religious conflicts in the? I guess we can speak, about the LGBTQ plus community. Is there any that you've heard about or that you've experienced?
Yes, there definitely is. And I've experienced it on both ends. On one end, which is probably one where a lot of people hear about, is people often use religious beliefs to justify hate against the LGBTQ community, using things like the Bible says this, or God hates fags, you're going to hell, things like that. And I've heard all those things, since I was a kid. I'm not religious myself, but I know a lot of people who are. And I've, going back to the earlier conversation about whether I have people in my life still that are not supportive of me as a person. There were people who were very religious, very Christian, and I had to, cut them from my life because of that reason, because they put religion over seeing someone for who they were as a person. And not only, it's okay to be religious in my eyes, because I still have friends who are religious, who are very believing of God, and that's okay to me. Just because I don't, go to church every Sunday doesn't mean that's wrong in my eyes. But I think going back to the intent, right? If the intent is that you're hating someone by using the words of the Bible or the words of God to justify that, that's not okay to me. And I think on one end, that's what I've seen a lot of. On the other end, also, I have experienced, not as much, but definitely have experienced where religious people have surprised me in a positive way, where I found myself even stereotyping, religious people, like, oh, she's super Christian, she's super religious, she's gonna hate, the gays and stuff for sure. And the moment I got to know, that person that I'm thinking of right now, a little bit more, the more I realized, oh, I was wrong to have judged her, to have not seen her as a person, to have just labeled her as she's a religious person. Therefore, she's not going to support the LGBTQ plus community. And so I've experienced it on both ends. Of course, I definitely like the end of where it's the love and the support, coming out of religious people definitely helps lift the community. And I think sometimes, to be honest, those allies are one of the most powerful types of allies, because of the fact that they show people you can be religious and you can still love your neighbors like the Bible says you should.
Awesome. Well said. I guess we're gonna wrap it up for this episode, but thank you again, Ricky, for coming on to the show. Anybody that wants to check your podcast, it is Gay Narratives on you're on everything, Spotify, Apple, Google, and all of those. And if they want to connect with you through Instagram, what's your Instagram?
My Instagram is @gaynarratives.
At Gay Narratives. Okay. And yeah, for any of the listeners out there that have any feedback, any comments, want to get in touch with us, you get in touch with us on Gmail, offthewalk.info@gmail.com, and also on Instagram, Off the Walk Podcast. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. And Eric, you got what's our coffee setup right now? Anybody? Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, so if you want to, support us through a small little donation or whatever, keep the lights running, let us produce more episodes, you can go on to that Coffee or Kofi. I don't know how to pronounce it. KOFI, and then you can just support us through there. But besides that, yes, thank you, Ricky, again. Your story when you came out to your mom had my heart beating because you were building up so much tension. I was like, just say it already. I was
Just tell her. In my mind, I was thinking, she's gonna whip out that the feather duster and just start spanking you or something. I was like, oh, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen?
Exactly. That was some crazy cliffhanger. You're leaving us hanging right there. So, but overall, yes, it was awesome speaking with you. Very educational as well too, and yeah, that's it right there. So yeah, for all of our listeners, until next time, come walk with us again.
See ya.
See ya. Thank you for having me.